that little pop-up where you see something in the description below at the bottom of the website asking, what can you rate your experience 1 to 10? How was your experience today? A UX researcher takes that information and actually does something with it, right? It's not just to say, hey, check a box and we're great, we're 10s, we're rated 10, we're awesome. No, then we take that information and utilize it to make your experience better.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're tuning from. I am Joseph M. Smith, and I'm here with Jimmy. Jimmy, I'm so glad to have you to the show.
Thank you so much for letting me join up.
I'm glad that we're able to do this, join up finally together. It's going to be a really good conversation. And I know everybody's looking at me like, what happened to your glasses? My wife told me that actually that reflection was very distracting for her in regards to my light in my glasses and all the stuff she could see. So she was like, take it off. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really need it anyway. So, so I decided to go without the glasses. And I wanted to kind of just get on here and say thank you again for all those who are subscribed to the YouTube channel. For those that are listening on the podcast, whether Apple, Spotify, or Google, or anywhere else podcasts are sold, thank you for joining us on another edition of Tech Niche Tips. So right now, I just want to say again, I have Jimmy with me here, Mr. Jimmy Chung. He is actually an expert in the field and working in the industry of UI, UX design. And he's going to break that down because I'm not going to lie. I bring on guests oftentimes that are experienced because I want to know questions that we may have similar questions regarding different topics or subjects. So with that being said, we're going to get right into it because I'm curious about this. But before we do, let's find out a little bit about Jimmy. So Jimmy, tell us about yourself, a little about your work experience, and a little bit about how you got into this field.
Sure, absolutely. And it's funny though, when you ask people in the UX field, especially when people, in my experience of 15 plus years of experience, they'll give you so many different answers, right? But my answer, how I started, is actually very interesting. I've been an entrepreneur my entire career, powered by grit and hustle. And I actually started out, when I was 19. When I started out when I was 19, I was in the beginnings of everyone getting to like MySpace, and everyone's creating their own websites. Yeah, yeah, right.
That takes me back.
Takes you all the way back. So back in the MySpace days, when everyone's creating their own profiles, everyone's editing code. Well, I was very involved in getting obsessed about eBay, right? In the beginning of eBay. And I got involved into the beginning stages of drop shipping before it was cool, before everyone's talking about it on TikTok, Instagram. I was drop shipping. I was drop shipping on eBay. I was studying e-commerce. I was doing a lot of A/B testing out different products, different marketing techniques, different graphics on eBay marketplace. And that was my beginning stages of I fell in love with user experience, right? Because you kind of learn when you're doing it, right? At the point, I didn't realize I was doing it, but at the point of, putting products on eBay, putting titles, descriptions, images, and then getting questions. And this is where I'm studying from my users, my customers. They were asking me for certain things like, well, can you give me a description of the product? Can you give me certain images of the product? Can you give me certain angles of the product? And I'm studying what the users want, and where they're struggling. And I'm also studying the pages of my competitors on other eBay channels and whatnot. And that was like my beginning stages into the intros of understanding the user, understanding user problems, and then testing different solutions, right? Managing that. Eventually, that entrepreneurship got me my first job, my first corporate career job at Foot Locker.
Nice.
Love Foot Locker. And my beginning stages of Foot Locker, I actually joined the East Bay division, right? Those, any kids that were sneakerheads collecting Jordans back in the day, going to class, flipping the East Bay catalog, you know what I'm talking about. We call it the East Bay magazine. Yeah. That was my dream company to jump into, right? I was that kid that read the magazines. I couldn't afford anything, but I still loved it. I got my first internship at East Bay, aka Foot Locker at the time, and I I was actually given I completed two internships, and I was given the opportunity to create some R&D, right? To do some
Mm.
studying on, hey, how can I take baseball products, right? And how can I evolve baseball products to be something that consumers will need, but trying to
Oh,
discover what they want, right? And that's why I started to do research and doing interviews. I interview baseball players, interview softball players in my local leagues, right, to understand what
mm,
bats they liked, what bats they liked, what bats they didn't like, what brands worked for them, what brands didn't work. Did
oh,
a lot. That's what my biggest exposure to, interfacing on a person-to-person live interviews, collecting that data,
yeah.
doing product review videos, right? So a lot of the on-field experience incorporated into those internships, of studying the users themselves, the people that are buying the products, right? And then taking that information back to the actual e-commerce strategies teams to be able to use that information to be able to sell and be able to optimize Foot Locker's properties, right? To
Yeah.
be able to sell to the customers. Um, but yeah, like please feel free to pause anytime you want. I'm
Well, I, I'm gonna say this because I'm thinking people are like shaking their heads like and then they're like, wait, what? Wait, what did he say? ¿Cómo se llama? And they're trying to figure out. So I'm gonna go and say, let's break it down for some people who may not know. Uh,
yes,
because you said it before this conversation started that UI and UX design that could be tricky for people to really kind of grasp it. So let's break it down. Let's start first with what is UI?
yeah, absolutely. So UI is user interface, right? Typically in the field, especially anybody that enters the field through colleges or boot camps, they do get that exposure, right? And it's mostly what you see from a design perspective. What you may expect from a UI is somebody that's actually designing, like a UI designer, for example. That's a occupation, right? The responsibilities of a UI designer is to be able to make sure that they're able to wireframe, like be able to take requirements, be able to take a user's problem, take the user's information, and be able to convert it to an actual wireframe, right? And
Hmm.
what like what is a wireframe, right?
Yeah. We're getting
we're gonna
deep today.
we're gonna break it in deep, right? So I'll give you a real life example. Let's say, for example, I if I'm sitting down and I'm talking
Mm,
to a customer is telling me about how they like to shop, right? I'm studying their behaviors. I'm watching them navigate through websites.
yeah.
Now, the next stage of what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to observe and collect that information of what are the pain points, what works for them. I'm going to take that information as a UI designer, and this is not going to be a perfect sense because we haven't talked about UX yet.
Yeah.
As a UI designer, I'm just interpreting one side. I'm just looking at how a customer utilizes a website, for example, and I'm just taking a pencil. Some people are very old school to take a pencil and they'll start drawing. All right, here is a
Mm.
website. This is the menu. This is where the images would go. It started very raw. That's what we call it, like a
Oh, so
really
the
raw
visual
wireframe.
aspect of it.
Yes, yes, the visual
Ah,
aspect of it, right? You're
okay.
translating to paper. You could do it. You could use Figma to start drawing wireframes, but basically you're drawing it out, right? But you're not making it visually pretty yet, right? You're just
Okay.
trying to figure out where should the information land, right?
The
Where should
layout.
I put? Yeah, the layout, the information.
Uh,
Where should I put the buttons? Where should I put the images? You're starting out there very fresh, but you do not
yeah.
have enough information at that point um, to say, "Hey, I'm done," right? So UI designers just like starting that beginning journey of creating the wireframe. They haven't done the full-fledged visual treatment yet, but that's usually
Okay.
how they start.
And then UX would then be the opposite of that, right? Would it be well, not the opposite? That would be more of the information, the experience. Would you say?
Yes, yes. So
Okay.
UX, the thing is that everyone has a different interpretation of UX and how it applies, right? So user experience, right? It's about the holistic experience of the user, right? And the occupations that falls into UX will usually be a UX researcher, right? I'm just going to give it like
Mm,
a very simple example. There's a lot of different occupations for UX. So I'm just going to pick
okay.
the UX researcher, for example. The UX researcher's responsibility is to go out there and pretty much discover what are the user needs, right?
Mm.
What are the user problems, right? And they're trying to figure out what are the biggest problems that I need to solve for the user, what's very impactful so that we could provide the right value, right?
Okay.
So a couple examples here for a UX researcher. A researcher can conduct a usability test to observe what a user is doing, right? So, for example, if I'm shopping for shoes, right, at Foot Locker, for example, I, myself as a UX researcher, I want to know how is the customer shopping for shoes, where are they struggling, right? So I'm observing that behavior, and that can be
Wow.
conducted through inviting the customer to do a test, or I could observe out in the wild how a customer goes into the store and picks a shoe
Huh.
and converses with the store team members. But that's just one example. They take
Wow.
all that information, right, whether it's quantitative or qualitative, they take all that information and identify trends, right?
Mm.
And if they start to identify trends, what's working for the customers? What's really working that we're really good at? What are some pain points that we haven't solved that we got to solve? And that
Wow.
they take this information and they create like what they call a research summary, and they provide this to a UI designer, and they provide that education to the UI designers, like, hey, this is what's working, right? Let's not break this, right?
Yeah.
Keep maintaining, but these are some pain points that we may want to address. And this information, this rich data, helps to informs the UI designer to figure out where they need to prioritize their designs, right? And how would they approach the design? So now they're backing up the designs with actual data from about the users, right? Now you're
Huh.
being very user centric.
There, thank you so much for watching this video. This video is actually sponsored by Course Careers. So whether you're interested in breaking in as a tech sales representative, if you're interested in actually doing IT or digital marketing, not only do they have free introductory courses for you right now, go to the description and check that out, but they also have $50 off that you could get through me, Joseph 50. That's right, $50 off through Joseph 50. So if you're interested in getting into that course, any which one, whether it's again tech sales, IT, or digital marketing, look no further. Go down to the description below, click on the link, and sign up right now. What are you waiting for?
So that's where you kind of see like back some 25% for this or this on the website. That's kind of where that UX comes from. And would you say that they often use surveys and things like that to gather that information? Because I'm thinking about the many surveys that were offered to on multiple different ways, whether it's on like YouTube, for example. We may be watching YouTube and they say, "Did this ad? How well was this ad or to like your needs or whatever the case may be? Agree, disagree, strongly disagree." So that's all part of UX. Wouldn't
Yeah,
is
it's
that
all
correct?
part of UX. Yeah,
Wow.
there's a UX researcher collecting that information. So whenever you go to a website and you see that little pop up, or you see something in the description below at the bottom of the website asking, what can you rate your experience 1 to 10? How was your experience today? A UX researcher takes that information and actually does something with it, right? It's not just to say, hey, check a box and like, we're great, we're tens, we're rated 10, we're awesome. No, that we
Ooh.
take that information and utilize it to make your experience better.
So that the question that popped in my head is how valuable is a person that has that skill set, a UX researcher? Because now we're diving into market research. Now we're diving into all these different things that equate to businesses generating sales, thus having money, thus hiring more people. Like how essential is for somebody that just simply focuses on being a UX researcher? That's the title. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a UX researcher and a UI designer. Yes.
UX designer. So a UX researcher, how let me start there because I'm just kind of like fascinated now that I
Sure.
finally got that all cleared up. If y'all are like me and you're just like, oh, it's starting to make sense now, go ahead and put it in the comment section because it's starting to make sense for me. So the UX researcher, what can a person who's looking to get into that field expect to receive compensation wise? Because it sounds like it's a very valuable role. Am I wrong?
Is extremely valuable role. And here's the thing: a lot of companies are starting to, just you can just find a variety of companies that are either starting off and adding UX researchers, and there's going to be mature companies that actually have multiple levels of researchers, right? And the compensation will
Mm.
vary. Compensations will vary, right? If you just want an example, usually UX researchers can make anywhere from $80,000 and up, right? The averages is in the six-digit range. But if you're just starting off from a boot camp or school, it's it might be 60 in some organizations right that are just starting off. In a
Yeah.
more mature organization, you could be lucky. You could be making 80, right?
Hold on.
Yeah.
Wait a second. So you're saying, and I'm just because I saw this recently. I saw a TikTok video of this guy who's a nurse. Yeah, I got my entry level position, 60K. You're saying that somebody that takes a tech boot camp can become a UX researcher and make the equivalent to a nurse? The amount, like 60K, is a pretty good salary, and
Yes,
that's just entry
absolutely.
level.
Yes, absolutely. You definitely can. I've definitely hired entry level UX researchers, and they not only have. I'm not in addition to the boot camps, in addition to the college education. These are people that actually did internships too, right? So
Oh,
I do encourage doing some internships, getting some experience, a little bit of experience before you get there. But yeah, you can make that much because a value of a UX researcher is so important to our organization, right?
uh,
And I'll definitely apply more little support behind that. But yeah, feel free to keep shooting your questions.
yeah. Well, I'm trying to put my mind in the mind of those that are listening right now.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people, again, they see. I'll tell you what I thought when I saw UI UX design. I'm thinking, oh, this person just creates websites. That's another fancy way of saying a web designer, which is a part of it if you're looking at the UI portion of it. But it's so layered.
it's so
Like,
deep.
oh, this is so deep. Like, it's an industry within itself. It's a totally different world within itself. And so I can imagine that my audience is looking at each other if they're watching, if they're with somebody, like, wait a second, I didn't even know what this was, or I just assumed one aspect of it was all that it was. If this is like, if you're like me and you're just like, hey, I didn't know what this was. I'm learning. I'm learning right now. Go ahead and put yourself in the chat. Listen, this is why I have this channel in the first place. So we talked about somebody in UI, excuse me, somebody that's a UX researcher. I'm getting it right now.
Yep, you got it.
How much they could be possibly making and the value that's there. And let's go right over to somebody that's in UI, the UI user interface. What is a range for somebody, the value that's there, the compensation that they can expect?
Absolutely. So in the industry, you're starting to see it's usually around the same range, right? It's not going to be that different between a UX researcher and UI designer, and I'll explain why down the road, right? But right now, from a UI designer, you probably can expect the same range. And again, it depends on your location. I do have to
Mhm.
reinforce that. It depends on your location, right? So for example, you're in California, entry level is probably not going to be 65. It's probably going to be a lot higher than that, right?
Mhm.
So that location does vary. That's very important to hear. So that's something that I do want to reinforce. But it's around the same.
Wow. I live in the Northeast. I live in Jersey. So the fact that I love the tech sales field, but with the fact when he said it matters where you live, and California, you might get more than 65. That to me, that's like, man, if especially people that are artistic, they're like, oh wait, let's find out more about this. I'm interested in this. Oh man. So my mind is racing in a good way.
Yeah, and I'll look to add more into it, right?
Please,
So
please do.
for example, there's probably gonna be some questions of compensation. I know there's gonna be a lot of industry experts questioning some of these salaries, but
Mhm.
this is just based on my experience, based on talking with recruiters, talking with hundreds of applicants that provide the salaries, right? And that's kind of the range that I kind of discovered. Usually entry level is between like 65 to 80, and once you're senior and you get a couple reps in, you're probably gonna, again, it depends on what market you're in. I'll say some of the mid markets I see are probably for a senior level, for a UX
Mhm.
researcher or a UI designer. It could be around 120, right? 120 to 130 ish, right?
Ooh,
And that's talking about the senior level. But if and that's just mid range. If I'm talking to somebody from California or Washington, where the cost of living is
yeah.
higher than myself in where I live in Texas, sometimes those senior roles, I've spoken to people and they make 250, right?
Mm.
So I'm talking about a senior designer making 250 per year. like probably $200,000 base and overall compensation, et cetera, et cetera. But it really depends on the location, right? But
Yeah.
you're probably asking why, like why does a
Tell me
researcher
why.
get this much information? Why does a designer deserve this much compensation, right?
Yeah.
They're extremely important roles, and I'll tell you why. Right, I'll give you an example. Several years ago, I did some consulting, right, and I did consulting for a very short research gig, right,
Mm.
and this research gig, I actually revealed I worked with a retailer, and I kind of revealed to them. I interviewed their customers, I looked through the Google Analytics data, and I found an opportunity that was what I call the $100,000 opportunity, where they were
Ooh.
losing money by $100,000
Uh-oh.
the way I calculated, and it turned out to be true. They actually, once we fixed this bug, this usability bug, they actually made more than $100,000. But at the time, I was estimating to be $100,000 due to the amount that they were losing, right, based on events, based on AOV, based on the conversion that they're losing, and that was just me playing a role as a UX researcher, right, in this gig,
Mm.
and providing that value, right? So
Wow.
you have to think about that. Somebody that's doing this full time as a UX researcher, and as a UI designer, when you work for when you work for a company, you're providing a ton of value, right? And something I do want to add is a lot of researchers and a lot of designers that I do meet, especially entry level, right? You college graduates and graduates from boot camps. Often, what I often encounter is that they undersell themselves.
Mm.
They don't sell themselves as revenue generators, and that's something that needs to
Ooh.
change, right? And they don't know their market share, how much market share they can actually bring, and
Come
they
on
usually
now.
sell themselves as like, "Hey, I'm here to solve user problems," and sometimes these organizations, you will encounter this. I think every UX professional has encountered this. When you
Uh,
join a company and their UX maturity is not that high, right? They're like, I get it. Things need to be usable. It needs to be user friendly. They like to do the talk, but they're not really bought in, right? So
mm.
that makes it very tough for an entry level person coming in, because now they're thinking like, hey, I'm going to join the company. I'm going to do some research. I'm going to talk to customers, and I'm going to make it easier for them to use the website or use the mobile application. But
Yeah.
where they struggle with is
Ooh, come on now.
quantif- quantifying revenue here. And this is something I do want to talk about. It's very
Please,
it's
please.
extremely
This
important.
is good.
Anyone that's coming into the field, and I've been having, I've been open to work for a little while, but I've been spending my free time educating new college graduates, anybody that's coming from these boot camps, like, hey, you got to UX chops. Now you know how to do UX research. Now you know how to do UI design. So does everyone else in your
Ooh.
field.
How do you
Everyone
stand
else.
out?
How do you stand out? So how do you
Woo.
stand out is to bring your business. You got to put on your business hat on, right?
Mm.
So I know this is gonna be. I'm gonna be shifting high level, low micro level. So
Okay. I'm
bear
trying to
with me
follow
here.
you there. Then hold on to
So
the reins.
so I'll give some examples. A UX researcher and a UI designer, right? They're mostly focused. They've been trained in college and boot camps to study the user, pick a problem, right, and make it easy to use, make it accessible so that anyone can use your product, right?
Uh-huh.
And that's great. But when you're pitching to a CFO, a chief financial officer that holds um, holds control over your budget, that can empower you to do more things, you got to convince that CFO why should he spend money on UX, right? Because as a
Mm.
CFO, if they give money to you, they want more in return, right?
Yeah, ROI.
ROI. You making customers happy. Yeah, you can make customers happy by giving free stuff out, right? But you can lose money. So you got to find a way to make sure that you're helping the CFO, helping the your chief executive officer to prove the case that, like, hey, by doing this research, by doing this design, we're actually going to produce something that, yes, it will make it appealing to the consumers, it'll make it easy to use for the consumers, but we're getting something in return, right? And that's through building a business case. And that's something that's usually missing. I see that's missing in a lot of portfolios, right?
Mm.
You take a look at a UX researcher's portfolio or UI designer, they're talking about the outputs. And what I mean from an output perspective is that they will show like, hey, I did this research, I collected 100 surveys, I did the survey, and out of the surveys, 100 people, like, 80% loved the product, 20% did not, and some of them said these things about the product, and that was it, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Where do we go from there? Exactly. Right. We got the output, right? Now the important thing is outcome. We got to
Mm.
try outcomes. So as a researcher, when you're taking that information, gathering that information, this is where you need to partner with beyond your UI designer. You need to partner up, as a UX researcher, you need to partner with UI design. You got to partner with marketing. You got to partner with engineering. You got to partner with sales if you happen to have a sales department. It
Mm.
varies, right? You got to partner with customer care. You're taking all these different inputs, these different diverse perspectives of how your company is exposed to these users. Everyone has a different perspective, but
Yeah.
most importantly, you're taking in the user feedback as well. But
Yeah.
now, once you have this user feedback, now you understand the customers. You need to understand the business, right? At the end of the
Mm.
day, what are you trying to achieve as an outcome perspective, right? So when we
Yeah.
improve this user experience, what type of outcome we're trying to produce? I'll give you an example, right? Are you trying to improve conversion, right? Are you trying to improve revenue? Are you trying to increase orders per basket, right? Or order your average order value, right?
Mm.
These values really count because at the end of the day, these are the outcomes of most likely what your senior leadership is looking for, right? But at the end of the day, when you look at the monthly financials, the weekly financials, we got to pump those rookie numbers up, right? So,
Yeah.
so it has to do something with it. So building out those business cases, are talking about what problems we're solving,
Yeah.
which business metrics we're targeting, and proving proving out that when we do the research, we do the design, and we work with engineering to deploy it, we're also measuring what was deployed. Really
Mm.
show the executives and the leadership, like, hey, we did that work. All that work that was put in, those people hours that we put in, the outputs that we put in, produce this outcome, right?
Mm.
Now you're proving the value of UX and UI, right? Rather
Yes.
than just say, hey, we did the outputs, here's your research report, here's your design. It looks great, but we can prove that by tracking these values and measuring what we do with the customers, right? Using analytics, so the customer, we can show our stakeholder, collaborators, our senior leadership, what we actually did.
Hey family, it's Joseph here again. Now you have heard me talk about how tech sales has changed my life. I actually want to introduce you to another career that if you decide to go into it, truly is recession proof, and that is cybersecurity. Level Careers is a platform similar to Course Careers that is self-paced and allows you to obtain knowledge and education in cybersecurity, and get this, without prior experience or a degree. That's right. And so you definitely want to get into that. And if you are interested in learning more about cybersecurity, go ahead and click the link below. It's in my description, and use my promo code Joseph10. That's right. Use my promo code Joseph10 in order to save 10% off of the purchase price of that course. So without further ado, I'm not going to delay you. Go click on the link, check out the free introductory courses, and change your life today.
That is so deep on so many levels. I feel like they're like an equivalent to an accountant in a way that they're accounting for all that has happened, but they're also saying, and they're also like a financial advisor in the sense of that they're like, this is what happened, this is what we can do to increase this and over here. So that leads me to another question. I'm still stuck on UX researcher for now, but we're gonna go to
Yeah,
UI. I promise
yeah,
those
yeah.
that are interested in that. But in regards to the UX researcher, the type of person that would be a good fit for that, I'm assuming you're familiar with the DISC assessment. And I'm just gonna say it for everybody: like,
Yeah,
D dominant,
explain.
I is a person that's like, hey, I want to be your friend. S is I'm a strong S, and that we're sensitive, we're more people oriented. And then C are those people that are just very calculative, that are very much like, all right, this has to add up. Where the math has to math, right? And so What type of person you would say naturally fits a UX researcher?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's funny how you mentioned this method. It sounds very similar, like this personality test that's out there. I can't recall the name, but
Yeah.
it uses the red, blue, green, yellow
Yeah.
spectrum as well. But yeah, just for a UX researcher, it's gonna be somebody that's gonna be very analytical, right?
Mm,
Because you're gonna be playing both. You're gonna be processing different types of data,
yeah.
and so sometimes this could be a massive amount of data, right? So you have to be very analytical. You have to be unbiased. You have to be unbiased, right? You have to disconnect yourself from the product, right? Because now you're representing the users, right? But you're also making sure that you can tell stories. Storytelling is so
Mm,
important, and this is where
wow.
I do want to hone in on this point. Storytelling is probably a big opportunity for a lot of emerging UX researchers that do come out, right? They
Really?
know, yeah, I'll tell you that I met a lot of entry level UX researchers, even seasoned, they're good at talking about the customer, what they found out, right? If you were to ask them like how was the research, how did the research go, they can verbally tell it. But sometimes displaying that, conveying that during executive meeting, some I've seen people fall apart, right?
Mm,
And that is a skill set that should be worked on, right? And that's extremely important. Storytelling, it's something that all of us need to work on, right? I'm
yeah.
always working on it. Everyone needs to work on it. There's a lot of coaches that do work on storytelling, and for researcher, you do all that work. You're on the ground. You're doing the interviews. You're looking into data. You're taking a look at the surveys from a quantitative or qualitative perspective. You're processing all that feedback. Now you did the work to get the data. Now you need to package that together and convey the story of what were the trends, right?
Mm,
What were the trends? What did we find out? And the most important thing is, what are we going to, as a UX researcher, what is your take, right? Taking that feedback, what is your take on summarizing that into recommendations, right?
mm,
Because your job is to take that information and help others in your org. You need to help product management. You need to help the UI designers. You need to help others in your team to take that information, able to process it, right? So that
yeah.
storytelling, I'll be able to, you know, to be able to tell your collaborators how you got the research, right? Who was in the research? Why? What was the requirements for the research and the recommendations? Of summarizing that into something that's actionable is very critical to success.
Wow. You have to be not only a person that is analytical, but you have to be creative as well.
It's
And
very interesting, and
wow.
we'll talk more how that's emerging these days.
Whew.
But yeah, it's it's not easy. It's not easy. A UX researcher's job is not easy.
That's why they
Sometimes
get paid so well.
that's why they get paid so well. It's a tough job. It's rewarding, but it's tough.
Oh my. Oh my. Well, I gotta pause and say right now, if this is something that you are finding so much value in, let us know in the comments section below. Also, just so you know, one of the things that we're going to dive into is how to get into the field of UX researcher or UI design. One of the ways I know of is through a tech bootcamp that we talked about, and the tech bootcamp I could talk about is the one that I went through for tech sales, which is Course Careers. They actually have a UI design and UX researcher program that might be a good fit for you. But hey, listen, I don't want you to take my word for it. There's a free introductory course. You can check it out for yourself. If it's something that you find is a good fit, great. And if it's not, let's find something better, whatever it can be. But I basically can stand by Course Careers because from my personal experience, they have allowed me to go through and be able to land a job through their tech sales course. And hopefully you can have a great experience with the UI and UX course. In fact, if you have taken it, let me know in the comment section below. Message me directly because I really want to know. I really want to know what your experience was going through the course. So with that being said, let's just shift to the UI portion of it because I want to kind of get some wealth of knowledge there. And then we're going to talk about a few things to help people actually land a job in this role. But let's talk about the UI design. So again, analytical, that's UX. We kind of got that locked
Very
in.
analytical.
But I feel like the same sort of mixture is in also on the UI where you have to be creative but also analytical at the same time.
You do in order to be successful.
Mm,
A lot of UI designers will fall into the creative side, right?
yeah.
And we always need that creative side. We need that innovative creative side to make sure that we're able to solve complex problems, right? But you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. It's a lot of creative. The analytical piece, we'll talk more about that in a bit when we start talking about product design. But a lot of UI designers, yeah, they're more on the creative side, trying to figure out what are the patterns that users are used to, right? That will produce the most minimal amount of friction, right? How do I make it delightful for the users?
Huh.
And sometimes that creativity, there needs to be a balance. There's a balance between creating the blue sky approach of something that looks wonderful. It feels good to use the product, but there's something that we didn't talk about, and that's most important in this conversation is the engineering part too, right? You
Ah,
could design something super wonderful, but how long are you gonna wait for it to be built, right? So a UI designer, they have a really tough job as well. They're taking that information that's provided to them from a UX researcher, and one of the things that they do work on, and it's gonna vary, right? But a good UI designer will start out thinking about the critical information that needs to be put into a layout, right? What's the most important information to a user? They'll start there, right? They'll start prioritizing the most important information. And then they'll start to figure out, all right, where do I need to put this information that will make sense? Using a design system, right? A design system is going to have a variety, a library of let's say in simple terms, Lego pieces, right? It's going
okay.
to have a bunch of Lego pieces that you use over and over again, right, to design, right? So you can be very consistent.
I'm thinking Tetris when you said that.
So a UI designer would take these Lego pieces, right, and they could try to figure out, all right, based on user behavior, where I'm going to put these Lego pieces that the users will understand. Again, they're making an assumption until they'll start creating the wireframes using these Lego pieces
Hmm.
of where this Lego piece belongs. This Lego piece belongs here. When I click on this Lego piece, it should do something, right? That's
Mm,
the interaction piece, right? So that the users understand what's happening. So once they do that, once they do the design for motions, design for accessibility, making sure that anyone can use your product, they take this, what they call a prototype. So once you create the design and you're making the design clickable. So when you click on the design, it does things, right? Oh, so for example, if you are a UI designer and you created a mobile app, right? In the mobile app, there's a text box. You click on it, what's going to pop up? It's going to pop up a keyboard, right? And you start typing into the keyboard. So a UI designer will create a prototype to kind of mimic what the mobile application would do, right? So they'll mimic like and allow you to be able to click to see what can actually happen, take you through a step by step of through the prototype, so that you can see what's the expectation of the UI designer trying to interpret their design to
mm,
make sure that's interactive, so that the UX researcher understands, and now the UX researcher is going to take that prototype and test it with users, right? So they'll take the prototype to the users. The users will go through the prototype, and I'm talking about very simple terms here, right? Because there's
yeah.
so many ways to do it. But in very simple terms, the UX researcher will take this prototype and recruit users. If if I was building a mobile application for people that are buying sneakers, right, like basketball shoes, for example,
Yeah.
I would probably try to recruit users that are into basketball shoes or they like collecting basketball shoes, sneakerheads, right? And
Mhm.
I'll invite them to test the prototype to see uh, what do they like, what do they dislike, right? Just to observe while doing any bias. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of complexities with conducting those tests as well.
A lot of layers,
A
man.
lot of layers, tons of layers.
How
I'm
long
trying
does
to.
it take? It take like how long does I mean like seriously like a project, how long could a project really take? It sounds like it's gonna take some time.
It could take some time, and the thing is, here's something that I do want to share. Um, depending on the organization that you work for. When you work for a very super mature organization for UX, you may have some leg room, some room, a space to do UX research. For example, if you're working on something that is a brand new product experience, right? You may get some time, like a month or two, to conduct this research, right? Figure out who are the users, pain points, figuring out the business problems that you're trying to link to. You
Yeah.
probably do have the space, but you're trying to solve for something that's very small, right? Some organizations, some organizations are going to be very lean, where they don't have that much time, and the longer you take, you're not providing that business value, right? So some organizations, they you probably need to, they'll probably give you a week or two, and that's it to do all that research.
Wow, a week or two?
A week or two. It's not easy. But it really depends on the project, right? So it might be something that's very small. I'll expect that, you got to create expectations, right? If it's something that's very small that you're trying to understand, like, hey, this button, customers complain about a button that's not working, right?
Yeah.
If you're just trying to solve that button, it's probably going to take you a couple days, right? But if you're trying to design a new entire page, it's probably going to take you a little bit more than that.
Oh boy.
It really varies on the scale, right? Or you're building a brand new product, a brand new mobile application from 0 to 1.
Huh.
Yeah, it's going to take you a lot more than a few weeks. And you got to set the expectations for your leadership that, hey, in order to do this right, we need this information in order to make sure that we're putting in the right investments, right? Because everything
Yeah.
from UX research, UI design, down to engineering, those are people hours that are being spent in
Cost
meetings.
money.
It costs money to do the research, to recruit users, to do the
Yeah.
designs, to pay engineering. It all costs money. So to cut out research and ignore research and just create a design and just push out a solution, you could be costing yourself thousands of dollars, if not more.
So I'm thinking about, before we get into how to get the job, because I think some people are interested in that. I know my audience, they want to know the pros and the cons. Like, if you could hit up like a couple bullet points of, okay, these are pros of working in the field. We talked about the compensation, so that's I think good and decent. I think they like that, but they want to know like other pros and cons of working in this particular field. Could you give them some more? And then we'll move on to how to get into the role.
Yes, I'll say the pros. The pros, I'll tell you that whether you're doing UX research or being a UI designer, the pros is being able to feel really good that you're able to solve user problems at the end of the day, and be able to know that you made the company even more money of all that work that you put in from a research perspective, a design perspective. You are the creator. You are the creator from a research perspective. You are the creator from a design perspective. You put in that work, and you got to see it influence a user, and it's so rewarding to see a customer use your product, and you get to see, oh no, you improved it. You, like, not oh no, but like, oh yes, you improved the experience, right? And they light up and they talk about it, right? That's a win, right? But that's what's rewarding. That's what I hear from others, and that's what's important to me when I see that, right? I see user satisfaction goes up, business revenue goes up. That's important to me. The cons of UX researcher and UI designer, and again, we'll just talk about those professions. There's tons of other UX professions, user experience professions. I'll say the toughest thing is, industry wide, even the most mature UX user experience organization out there, they may market themselves as mature. They're really not, and it's very hard. Like, so I'll give you an example.
Okay.
I actually met up with a buddy. We talked about this UX maturity in the organization. There's a lot of organizations they do create the UX researcher roles, the UI designer roles. They have a team, but not everyone's bought in, right? And I've been there. Like, not everyone's bought into research. Like, love to have the role, but they want to tell these roles how to do the job, and that's the cons of being in these roles, right? And not every organization is going to be like this, but there is a struggle in the industry. These companies create these roles. You join the company as a researcher or designer, but then the cons is that you found out that the maturity level isn't that great. And when I mean what I mean by that is, these roles are created to be just to execute, not be part of strategy. I mean,
Ooh,
they don't have a seat at the table, right? So they
ooh,
come in as
wow.
a researcher, and they're having the cons is be able to build, make sure that you're able to build these business cases and be able to create that strong partnerships. And sometimes these roles were just created to be just pure execution. And what that really means is that you may have a leader in the company, right? Or other departments that don't understand the value of UX, and you don't have a executive level that sits on the level UX, right?
Yeah,
That organization has the luxury of having a C-level user experience officer, right?
yeah,
Or somebody that sits at that level to really convey that aspect. Now you're an individual contributor being trying to convince our senior leadership of why you're not there to just to execute. You're there to really help on
yeah.
holistically strategy and execution. So what they're usually told is, they get into the role, they start day one, they meet with the team, and they get assigned to a project. When they get assigned to a project, there might be a project manager. Project manager has collected all the business requirements, and you're given those business requirements to retrofit what you need to do from a UX researcher perspective, retrofit from a UI designer
Right.
perspective. Now you're getting requirements, and you're asked to produce execution, right?
Oh, boy.
And that breaks people's hearts as a UX researcher and a UI designer, because you're there to be able to do the research and be able to utilize that research from a user-centric standpoint and produce outcomes that are based on data, based on research, not requirements. And that
Mm,
is the cons of. I'm not saying that every company has that, but
yeah,
those are the cons in some organizations where you join in, and everything you learn in boot camp, everything you learn in college about your user center design or design thinking is out the window. Now you
mm,
become just work on pure execution, right? So stay away
yeah,
from those companies. So you happen to encounter them, right? You'll probably figure out the interviews. Ask about their culture. Ask about the UX processes. Ask about the
mhm,
maturity.
mm.
Stay away from those, because it's not worth the fight.
And that, you know what I think about when you said that? I think about all the movies, the cartoons where there's an exhibition, right? And you always have that scientist, that botanist, that archaeologist who's like, "We're not supposed to go here. We're not supposed to do that." And like, "Oh, get out of here! You didn't pay for this expedition," and whatever the case may be. And then they stumble onto trouble, and the archaeologist, whoever the expert was, like, "Hey, I told you so." I kind of see that is like the con that you're talking about. Is like you have this person that should be utilized as the expert to kind of guide and help with strategy, but is more or less, because of whatever reason, they're pushed to the back burner, and unfortunately that's not the case. So if you're still here after all that, and I still want to be in UI design, I still want to be a UX researcher, what would you say is, from, because let me just ask this question first before I say my question. How long have you been in this space, just to give people an idea?
Yeah, I've been in this space for 15 plus years,
Mm,
even before it was even called user experience, right? And a lot of individuals that are in my field, everyone has a different story, right? They're like, "Hey, I started in project management, I started in product management, I
yeah,
started in strategy, and eventually evolved into UX, evolved into product management." I've been in this space for a long time.
I can tell. I think a lot of people that are listening to this conversation can tell that you have been here and you've been doing this for a while. So with that being said, if you could go back in time, let's
Mhm.
just start there, and you could change
Yes.
things, what would you say is the ideal way for someone to become a UI designer or a UX researcher? What is the ideal path that somebody should try to take?
Oh yeah. So what has actually helped me? Um, And what's going to be very interesting, I'll talk to you about a role called a product designer, right? Um, you know, for those of you that are coming from college and coming from these boot camps, you're probably you probably had you probably study being a generalist, right?
Mm,
In UX, right? Or you have gravitated to being a UX researcher. You decide you want to be a UX researcher. Now you decide you want to be a UI designer. And ever since for the last few years, I don't know if anyone in the audience is noticing, but there's been a new emergence of jobs and responsibilities, right? What organizations becoming so lean, right? They're trying to figure out more intelligent ways to combine roles and responsibilities, right?
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. Some UX researchers that are very analytical are now being asked to do wireframes and design. Some UI designers are being asked to do research, and it's adding those responsibilities, and it's starting to really, and that comes from the problem of organizations being lean, and now they're adding more hats, and that's becoming like a transformation lately, right? There's always been a role called product designer, but the role of a product designer is starting to evolve. And some of you are like, what is a product designer? I've never heard of this role when I was in boot camp. And it's a combination, right? It's a combination of thinking like a researcher, doing the research, understand the users. From a designer perspective, you're also designing as well. But the key component that's starting to emerge, and if just to answer your question, if I were to take a step all the way back, I would much prefer to start out in product management, right? Product management, and this is where there'll be some tie-in here as well. Starting with product management, and so product management, for those of you that don't know, and I'm going to try to keep it very high level. But let's say, for example, you have a mobile application, right? There's a role called a product manager that basically will frame, they're responsible for the metrics of the mobile application, right?
Yeah.
So everything from how much money does a mobile application make, all the finite metrics of user engagement, right? How many people are coming to the mobile application, utilizing it, how many people are dropping off, how many clicks it gets, and that entire mobile application, the success and the failures, how it's getting rated in the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. Somebody's managing all that. That's a product manager. So our product manager's responsibility is to make sure that that mobile application is their product. They're managing that product, right? They're managing the life cycle of that product, everything from building it from the ground up to maintaining it, to evolving it to the next stage, creating roadmaps of basically problems to solve to be able to hit their objectives of revenue or engagement. They're responsible for all that. And that product management piece, not only are they managing, working with engineering, working with designers at UX researchers separately, certain aspects, but they're managing how work gets done, right? But they're focusing on the what, the why. Why are we, like, what problems do we need to solve? And when I talk about problems, they're not necessarily like something's broken, but what are some complex problems that we are trying to solve for a business in order to grow revenue for this mobile application, right? So they're thinking like the business, because they are the business. Certain ways, we're not, some organizations not the business, but they have business metrics that tie to. They're responsible for business metrics. They're trying to solve business problems, and they're tying business problems and the actual product problems and the user problems all together, right? And they're creating that link, that relationship, business, user problems, all together, right? So
this does not sound like an entry level position. This sounds like a place where like your final destination, like the movie, except you're alive in this one. I'm just
so when you're doing that role, right? You're understanding how the business works and how the business gets interconnected with your product. How does the product get interconnected with your users? You're looking at everything holistically, and when you start there, having a business mindset, you understand the reason we do things is for the business. Now, once you have that mindset, once you have that knowledge, and then you start to get into UX research, now you're doing deep diving into, all right, now I understand what the business problems are. What are the user problems associated with it, right? Because I know the business problem is, business problems, you usually will work through the business problems. You'll figure out which are the biggest business problems to prioritize.
Yeah.
And that kind of streamlines everything else, where you need to figure out what are the user problems that are associated with those business problems. And now, if you're able to start out with a product management mindset, now you're going to UX research, now you're going to UI design, that started to merge. And it's kind of funny. Yeah.
It lends itself to each other.
It does. It does that balance,
Okay.
right? I'm not saying that it's perfect in every organization, right? But that's
Yeah.
some organizations don't do product design like that, but that's starting to merge, right? When you're a product designer, you think like a product manager. You're obsessed about business problems, but you also, some organizations, you are lean. You don't have a UX researcher. You are doing the UX research. You don't have a UI designer. You are the designer. You are doing design. You are creating the prototypes, right?
Yeah.
So you're doing it all, and you're working with engineering. You're working with collaborators across the organization to make it happen. But at the end of the day, you are responsible for the end experience, right? But it's, that's the thing. It's starting to emerge toward that, and you can have a lot of arguments here. You're gonna have people in the product management world, product managers are gonna be like, hey, stay out of work. You're kind of butting in. You got to butt in, right? But it's very interesting. There's some really product designers when they think like a product manager. Oh, they're so powerful. Like they're
Wow.
not powerful from a ego standpoint, but powerful from a value standpoint, right? When they provide value to the company and the business, now they're getting listened to. Now they're getting eyes on them, because then when they're talking about their solutions and they talk about the priorities, they talk about the road mapping, they could talk to executives about why we should do this, right?
Yeah.
Because they're using a very holistic workflow, right? They understand the entire workflow, what it takes in order to get stuff done.
Wow. I never thought about it so deeply. And I think that a lot of people that are probably on the fence of trying to figure out where they should land in tech, I don't even know if they thought about it this deep, but that allows us to kind of get a really good picture about, okay, this is what I'm stepping into. Oh, this is that world. And so I think that that's going to be something that a lot of people are going to find value in. If you found value in this conversation, I want you to go ahead and put it in the chat below. Please let Jimmy know how much you appreciate him. And also, they can find you on LinkedIn, right? They can connect with you there. That's not a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. You can just go to linkedin.com/Jimmy Chung UX. You'll be able to easily find me.
And so let me ask you this last question, because I think sometimes nowadays, when it comes to the tech industry, tech boot camps are more readily embraced than it was years ago. Is this particular field, UI design or UX researcher, is this particular field embraced when it comes to just taking a tech boot camp to get in there? Or are they still looking for people that have a degree in this field in order to land a job or a role?
I'll tell you, from the perspectives of going to college and getting a degree, I'll say about probably like 10 years ago, you're probably going to find many colleges offering user experience bachelor's of science degree, right? That, I'll tell you, as a hiring manager, that's not important to me, right? Whether you went to a 4-year college or not. What's important to me is your outcomes, what you produce, right? Not every hiring manager is going to say that, but if you're able to work on a project, whether you go to Upwork or Fiverr, or you work consulting, and you're able to land that internship or land a mini project where you're able to provide value, that's important to me as a hiring manager. It doesn't matter what college you went to for me, right? I mean, everyone could. It's not saying that everyone, but like, let's say for example, 100 kids went to college, right? They all got the same degree. Well, what makes you different, right?
True.
The difference could be your outcome, right? Not your outputs. You all can do the same. You all have the same frameworks. You all have the same portfolios of doing the same structure that you're taught in college. Same thing for the boot camps. You're taught to do the same thing. And I definitely want to share this with you and the community is hiring. As a hiring manager, I see a lot of portfolios that look the same from these two tech boot camps. And whether you're a fan of boot camps or not, for me, I encourage. Not every boot camp is going to be. It's not going to be great for every student, right? Some of these things are $10,000, $6,000, $8,000, and you're trying to get into the field, trying to get a job. They're expensive, right? And sometimes even more than that. Sometimes $20,000.
Yeah.
I'm not sponsored by any boot camp. I don't have any tie-ins with any boot camps, but I am anti-boot camp, right? And I'll tell you why. Especially for somebody that's trying to get into the field, I'd rather have you go into Coursera or Google, some entry level, try out the free courses, see whether you like it. It's not for everybody, right?
Yeah.
And once you learn through these $30 courses, $50 courses, right, you go into the end-to-end experience. Interaction Foundation is also a good one as well. It's very low cost. You get to experience, you get to go to the courses, you get to go to the materials, you get to understand why UX is important. Once you go through that, some of these courses will give you an exercise to create a portfolio or create a case study.
Yeah.
But you got to make it your own. Go out there, identify a very unique business problem, and it has to be real. You cannot just be like, hey, let me just go make up something, right? Because your work, when you're presenting that to a hiring manager, is just made up work. You never proved it. You never proved any value of it, right? So start out small. Do some real life research. Start interviewing people realistically, right? Create, work with others, team up, create a prototype, really test that out in the market. There's a lot of applications out there where you can do that yourself. There's a lot of no-code applications as well. Just make the attempt, buy it, see whether you like it, and you're not spending thousands of dollars to figure out like, hey, I'm going to create the same portfolio like the rest of these boot camp attendees, right? And seriously, I don't want to offend anyone. Kudos to you that you did these boot camps, right? You worked really hard for these boot camps, but once you have done that, you need to take it to the next level. You need to get real life experience by starting to produce these. I'm not saying that you need to go have somebody hire you for these initiatives, but create a project you own. Right. Think about the next application, the new newsletter that you want to do. Right. There's affordable options out there, and really showcase that you can do a case study. Use that case study to the hiring managers to show that I'm unique. I did not produce the same camp exercise, the same boot camp portfolio, because it doesn't make you different. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to say. It's not to like say that you didn't work hard for it, but I'm trying to provide this context so that you could add that value and be very, very unique and different.
I like that. I like that. When you said the price points of some of those boot camps, I was like, oh, my heart. I was like, because like one thing I love about Course Careers, being a tech sales, using it for my tech sales career, is that Course Careers is one of the most affordable things out there. It's literally $500, $450
That's awesome.
for promo code,
That's
and
awesome.
you could pay that in like payments. Like they break it down like as easy as it could possibly be. But I love what I like about what you said is that even if you were to go to tech bootcamp that's affordable, try to find as much information as you possibly can to create yourself a unique portfolio that separates you from other people. Because guess what? The tech industry is huge, but certain fields are not as huge. And so the hiring managers may start to see a trend. I'm assuming, am I right? Or am I right in saying that, or am I wrong in saying that?
You definitely do see a trend. I talk to other hiring managers, and they see the same thing over and over again, and it starts to be very repetitive, and you're not able to see the difference. And I want to reinforce an advice to the community. If you're looking to courses, right, you don't have to go for the big boot camp. So you can afford it, great. But check out YouTube. There's a ton of designers, product designers, UX researchers they will walk you through the day in the life of a UX researcher.
I was just going to say
the day in the life of a product designer. Also, there's some awesome people that are out there in the field that record the day-to-day, but they're also doing free tutorials, right? Watch their free tutorials, and some of them will offer what they call a masterclass. Right. Some of the master classes are very similar to your example of $500, right? But the thing is, they've proven that value to you through the free tutorials. You know what you're getting yourself into, right?
Yeah.
Rather than committing to it's expensive, right? It's expensive. It's expensive to pay $10,000, $12,000, and even
my heart again.
So that's almost like a car, right?
It is a car.
It is a car, right? And some boot camps will be like, you don't have to pay anything. until you get a
You
job.
get the job, and then you got to pay them like 15.
Then you got to pay.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get a lot of hate for that, but like, don't do that.
That one hurts.
It hurts. I
hurts
hear
more.
horror stories, and sometimes your first entry level job isn't gonna pay you that much, and now you're gonna feel that pain, right? So
Yeah.
taste it, sample it, try out those $30, $50 courses, YouTube tutorials, see whether you can. Do you even like it? Do you even like the work, right? Before you
Yeah.
make the full transition and commit yourself, and then eventually later,
Yeah.
you can start investing in yourself. You want to do that full boot camp to hone in on your skill sets and do some advanced skills, then find those courses. Not just
Yeah.
don't do the elementary stuff. Or save the elementary stuff for the lower $50 courses.
I totally agree with you in regard to, and listen, I say it all the time here. I'm an affiliate with Course Careers and whatever the case may be, but I was just going to suggest the same thing. I was going to suggest YouTube University, because you want to kind of get an idea of what it is. But here's another thing too. You could connect with people on LinkedIn who are already in the role and just kind of like start to create genuine connections with them, genuine relationships with them, and ask them, hey, I'm really interested in getting into this field. What would you like? Could I have a conversation with you? Can I give you some coffee virtually, or whatever the case may be? Virtually we can meet, or if they're in your area, you could meet together. I think the tech community is one of the most inclusive, welcoming communities that I have ever been a part of. And people, if they have the time and they have the bandwidth, they'll open themselves up to you and be like, yeah, let me show you what I know. And that's another way to do it if you're looking for like a genuine mentorship, even a sponsorship type of relationship. You can develop that through LinkedIn. So
absolutely,
I like what you really said at the end. And hey, listen, I am an affiliate with a boot camp, a couple boot camps, but I'm more concerned about people getting into this space more than anything else. So kudos to you for saying that. I really do like what you did say there.
Sample a cake bite before you buy the whole cake, right? Sample it first.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so with that being said, Jimmy, thank you so much for being on this show with me today. I want to remind everybody that his LinkedIn will be in the description below. Actually, it is in the description right now. So go ahead when the time is right and click on that. He's open to you following him. He's open to you making connections with him. And he is, maybe that's my cue, but he's in this space and he's willing to help to the best of his ability, help you and help others get into this space. I'm going to say it again. UI design and UX researcher. I think I got it, Jimmy. I think I finally got it. Thank you so much. And family, like I always say, until next time, we hope to see you on the other side. You take care now.